I call the member for McMahon.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, the mendacity of the Turnbull government has been on display for the Australian people in this question time which we just witnessed. The trickiness, the willingness to engage in the lowest of standards that the Turnbull government is prepared to engage in was on display for the Australian people over the last hour. But it's not just the saga of the Special Minister of State. It's not just the saga of the Ashby affair in which we see those low standards and that mendacity. It goes to the living standards of the Australian people as well. It goes to this government's plans to hit the living standards and the cost of living of the Australian people. There's one thing that's clear about this government's approach. They want to increase the GST, they want to put it on fresh food, they want to put it on health, they want to put it on education, and they're going to be mean and tricky about it as they go, Mr Speaker. The term mean and tricky was coined for a former Treasurer, but it should have perhaps been kept for this Treasurer because it is even more applicable to him. Mean and tricky. He's been at the dispatch box over the last 48 hours, Inspector Clouseau-like, saying he knows that the previous government had modelling on increasing the GST. Maybe he knows it because we told him. Maybe he knows it because the previous government had an inkling that the Liberal Party would propose increasing the GST and said to the Australian people, here's some of the impacts. Maybe that's how he worked it out, Mr Speaker. But what he didn't tell the Australian people is that he's modelled it as well. He didn't tell the Australian people he's modelled it well. He said the only people who've modelled the GST are the Labor Party. Nothing to see here, he said, Mr Speaker. Turns out there is something to see here. You can see that in the Sydney Morning Herald. And it says not only, Mr Speaker, did the former Treasurer, Mr Hockey, have modelling done of an increase in the GST, it is now with his successor, Treasurer Scott Morrison. We read it. It's a cracker of a read if you haven't seen it so far, Mr Speaker. I'd recommend it to you, the entire edition of today's Sydney Morning Herald. But, Mr Speaker, it's not just that. It's not just that, because the Treasurer has provided us now with an alibi. He says, well, maybe I did. Maybe I did get it modelled, but the states made me do it. The states made me do it, Mr Speaker. It's all at the request of Mike Baird. I didn't really want to do it, says the Treasurer. The states made me do it. Well, that's all very convenient. Well, he hasn't released his modelling. He hasn't released his plans. And I suspect I know the reason. Because it's not pretty reading. Because we know enough from what's on the public record of the modelling of increasing the GST about what impacts it would have. The fact that somebody on an average income would lose $3,100 a year or $60 a week, or that somebody on an income of $50,000 would lose $2,100 or $40 a week. We know that's the case. We know that's the case, and these are people who cannot afford this loss. Under this government, which is cutting family tax benefits as recently as today, attempting to cut family tax benefits. Under this government, which has seen lower wages growth, and under this government, which has seen living standards fall. But we also know that people will lose not just from an increase in the GST, but applying it to more things. A very big proportion of the household budget, the weekly shop, is fresh food, and so it should be. And so it should be, because it's very important to our nation's health. And a big proportion of many families' budget is health as well, large families dealing with health issues. And we know that if the GST is applied to these things, the lowest 20%, people in the lowest 20% income tax bracket, will pay 7% more, but those in the top 20% will pay just 3% more. We know that's a fact, and I suspect the Treasurer's modelling tells us that as well, or tells him that at least. Now, we know, Mr Speaker, the Treasurer's other alibi says, well, don't worry about that. Nothing to see here because we're going to cut taxes. We're going to cut taxes as well. But we know from the NatSem modelling that if a 5% tax cut is provided at every bracket, then that is going to make the package even more aggressive, hit low-income earners even more comparatively than just increasing the GST. We know that to be the case. So it's time for the Treasurer to come clean. It's time for the Treasurer to lay out not only his modelling but his plans to hit the Australian people and their cost of living. And we know, Mr Speaker, that this is not just about the hip pocket. This is also about health of the Australian people, something the member for Ballarat has been particularly active in pointing out and particularly effective in doing so as well. We know that the President of the AMA has said a GST on health would penalise the poorest and the sickest in the community when they are ill. He's gone on to say ensuring that the Australian people have affordable access to high-quality health care and medical services is a core function of responsible governments. The government must rule out introducing a new regressive tax on health and instead concentrate on increasing its investment in high-quality health services and hospitals that are needed to meet growing demand. That's the AMA. We know what they think about putting the GST on health. And the Rural Doctors Association has also said to add a GST of 10 or 15% to the cost of a consultation at the local doctors would literally be too taxing for many rural and remote patients, and the danger being that many may not decide to seek treatment from their local GP. Well, we heard a lot from the National Party on yesterday's MPI because they were sent out as the alibi because no Liberal want to do it. Let's hear from the National Party in this MPI as well, saying that a GST should be put on health in rural and regional areas. Let's hear the National Party disagree with the Rural Doctors Association. And it's not just that, Mr Speaker. The President of the Public Health Association, Professor Heather Yeatman, has said about a GST on fresh food. It's not just about a GST on health. It's also about a GST on fresh food. And Professor Yeatman put it well when she said, "Now is definitely not the time to be considering a GST on basic healthy foods. Diet-sensitive chronic disease due to unhealthy eating is now the greatest factor affecting overall burden of disease in Australia, even greater than tobacco. With funding already cut to many preventative health programs, it is not time to add to the further burden of disease. The GST exemption for healthy foods in Australia must be retained." So we know this to be the case, Mr Speaker. We know the impacts of an increase in the GST on family budgets. We know the impact on family health, and yet this Treasurer and this Prime Minister seem determined to do it and not to be honest about it, not to be upfront with the Australian people, not to be clear about their plans, to engage in a mendacious campaign at this dispatch box. That's what this Prime Minister and this Treasurer are determined to do. And then there's the impact on the economy, Mr Speaker. Now, we saw national accounts today. We saw growth of 0.9%. Well, that's better than last quarter. That's welcome. Terrible quarter last quarter. We're glad that it's better than 0.2. We're concerned, Mr Speaker, that net exports contributed 1.5% of the growth. 1.5% to growth, so it would have been a very, very bad set of figures indeed without net exports. We know that to be the case. Domestic activity is very troubled under this Treasurer's watch, very troubled under this Treasurer's watch. But we know what a GST would do to the economy as well. We know that because we have the lived history. We have the year 2000 when the GST was introduced, and remember that when the GST was introduced, the wholesale sales tax was abolished. And so taxes came off as a new tax came on. So its inflationary impact was less than putting a GST of 15% on fresh food. This would actually be more inflationary than the GST itself was 15 years ago. But we know when that happened, 15 years ago, the Australian economy then went through its worst six-monthly performance in 24 years, worse than the global financial crisis we had following the introduction of the GST. A miserly 0.1% growth in the September quarter and a negative quarter of 0.4 in December. We saw the then Treasurer rush to stimulate the economy as he was desperately concerned he'd have a recession on his watch. And we saw unemployment grow from about 6% in June 2000 to about 7% in June 2001 as the GST was being introduced. So the Treasurer has the gall to stand there and lecture us about jobs and growth when we know the impact of his policies on both, on jobs and growth. That's the impact of what we've seen before. 90,000 people added to the unemployed list. Now, we've seen so many times, Mr Speaker, this government, the Turnbull government, try to say, oh yeah, but the last 2 years was all in the past. Don't worry about the patchy economic performance the last 2 years. All in the past. It wasn't us. It wasn't me, Gov, says the Prime Minister. That reminds me, Mr Speaker, I have to tell you, Mr Speaker, I'm not a very good golfer. I actually don't play golf anymore. The member for Watson's a good golfer. The member for Corio is an excellent golfer. Senator Conroy is not a bad golfer. The member for Hunter, I understand, is pretty handy. He's never invited me to a game, but he's pretty handy, Mr Speaker. But I'm a very bad golfer. I don't play anymore. But I do know one thing about golf. There's a process I used to engage in when I play golf called the mulligan. You have another go when you don't get it right the first time. We've got a Prime Minister engaged in one big national mulligan, having another go. Don't worry about the first time. Didn't mean that. We might see economic growth going backwards. We might see economic growth going the opposite way. Is it any wonder, Mr Speaker, that we're seeing this government, this new Prime Minister and Treasurer struggling with these set of figures, struggling with the circumstances, that they will make worse by increasing the GST, that they will make worse by putting the GST on fresh food, that they will make worse by putting the GST on health and on education. They will make worse by their actions and their rhetoric. And the concerns that the Australian people have. Is it any wonder that this Treasurer is universally known as WTH, worse than hockey?